My name is Ndaizivei, and I grew up in a quiet village in Zimbabwe. Life was simple, filled with chores, laughter, and the love of my mother, a widow who taught me to work hard and remain kind no matter the circumstances. We had very little, but we had each other. One fateful day, our village welcomed a British woman, Mrs. Ashworth, who came to visit my country on a safari. She stayed longer than expected, mingling with the women and learning about our way of life. I often helped her to carry her belongings and guided her through the village. She noticed how I cared for my younger siblings and praised my gentle nature. Before she left, she pulled me aside. "Ndaizivei," she said, "I need someone to look after my elderly mother in England. You are perfect for the role. Would you consider it?" I was stunned. England? A land of opportunity, a world so different from mine. There was nothing to consider. I nodded eagerly, barely able to contain my joy. Mrs. Ashworth assured me she would handle all the arrangements, my passport, my visa, and the flight. It felt like a dream. That evening, I told my mother. She hugged me tightly, her voice trembling as she warned, "My child, keep this to yourself. Not everyone will be happy for you." But how could I keep such life-changing news a secret? Against my mother's advice, I shared my excitement with friends and neighbors. I told Chaz, my childhood friend, who had always been like a sister to me. I didn't notice the change in her expression or the spark of jealousy in her eyes. I was too focused on the future to see the storm brewing around me. Chaz and I had grown up inseparable, sharing secrets and dreams, but my news of going to England seemed to drive a wedge between us. At first, she feigned happiness, but her words were laced with bitterness. "England is far away," she said one evening as we sat by the river. "What if something happens to you there? You might regret leaving your village." Her tone unsettled me, but I brushed it off as concern. As the days passed, she grew distant. She stopped visiting me, and when we did cross paths, her eyes burned with something I couldn't understand. Perhaps it was envy. Then came the whispers. Villagers began murmuring that I was boasting, that I thought I was better than everyone else. The rumors stung, but I couldn't figure out who had started them. One morning, I saw Chaz speaking in hushed tones to a group of women. They glanced at me and laughed. My heart sank. Was Chaz turning the village against me? But I was too busy preparing for my journey to dwell on it. I focused on packing, completing my documents, and imagining the life I would build. I didn't know that Chaz's jealousy was festering into something far darker. Unknown to me, Chaz had sought out a feared witch doctor in a neighboring village. This man was notorious for his dark magic, and his services were not cheap. "I want Ndaizivei's dreams destroyed," she told him. "She must never leave this country." The witch doctor studied her with a knowing smile. "Such things are simple, but they come at a price," he said. Charles handed over her savings and provided him with a strand of my hair, which he had requested. He began chanting, mixing strange herbs and powders. When he finished, he handed her a tiny goblin. "This creature will fall on Ndaizivei, but she will never see it," he explained. "It will sabotage her journey, and when she reaches England, it will ensure that she is sent back in disgrace." Charles laughed, satisfied with herself. She couldn't wait to watch my downfall. As my departure date approached, strange things began happening. My neatly packed suitcase was often found open, its contents scattered around. Important documents vanished, only to reappear in odd places. Even my ticket went missing for 2 days before I found it under my bed. My mother noticed my frustration and urged me to pray. "Evil eyes are watching you, my child," she said. But I dismissed her fears. Then came the dreams. Every night, I saw shadowy figures whispering that I will never leave the village. I would wake up in cold sweats, but I convinced myself that it was just pre-travel anxiety. Unknown to me, the goblin was already at work, lurking unseen and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The morning of my departure was bittersweet. My mother hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Stay strong, my child," she whispered. "And remember, prayer is your weapon," she reminded me. I boarded the bus to the city, clutching my suitcase and ticket. The drive to the city was long, but my excitement overshadowed my nervousness. This was the start of a new chapter in my life. The flight to London was smooth. I stared out the window, marveling at the clouds and imagining my new life. I would work hard, save money, and send it home to my family. My mother's life would finally change for the better. Little did I know that trouble was waiting for me on the other side. When the plane landed, I joined the long queue at immigration, my heart pounding with anticipation. But as I waited, a woman behind me tapped my shoulder. "Your baby is so adorable," she said, smiling at me. Confused, I turned to her. "I'm sorry? What baby? I don't have a baby." She frowned. "Of course you do. Look, it's on your back." My heart raced. "No, I think you're mistaken." But she insisted, even cooing at something invisible to me. People in line began whispering, and I felt their eyes burning into me. When I reached the immigration officer, he glanced at me sternly. "Madam," he said, "we need the baby's passport." "What baby?" I cried. "I don't have a baby." He pointed at my back. "That baby," he said. My hands trembled as I touched my back, feeling nothing, but the officer was adamant. Without the baby's passport, I couldn't proceed. I begged and pleaded, but he refused to listen. Panic set in. What was happening? Why was everyone seeing a baby that I couldn't see? My dreams were crumbling before my eyes, and I had no idea why. I was escorted out of the immigration line, my protests falling on deaf ears. Tears streamed down my face as I pleaded with the officer. "I don't have a baby. Please check my suitcase again." The officer stared at me coldly. "You're carrying the baby on your back, madam. It's visible to everyone here. Without a passport for the child, you cannot enter the UK." I collapsed into a nearby chair, my mind racing. What baby? How could this nightmare be real? I tried calling Mrs. Ashworth, but her phone was off. Alone and confused, I stared at the faces around me. Some were sympathetic, and others were amused. Was I losing my mind? As I sat there, I felt a chill creep over me. It was as though something was breathing on my neck. My mother's words rang in my ears. She told me that evil eyes were watching me. While I waited in despair, the woman who had first pointed out the baby approached me. She seemed concerned, her earlier playful demeanor replaced with seriousness. "I've seen strange things like this before," she whispered, sitting beside me. "You are carrying something you cannot see, but others can see it." I looked at her, bewildered. "What are you talking about? I'm not carrying anything." She placed a hand on my arm. "My sister once experienced the exact same thing. Someone in your life doesn't want you to succeed. They've cursed you." My chest tightened. Could this be true? My mind flashed back to Chaz's bitter words and her sudden withdrawal from my life. But curses, that sounded ridiculous. As I sat there, the chill grew stronger. Suddenly, the woman gasped. "Look," she said, pointing to my shadow on the wall. I turned slowly. There it was, a shadow of me and something on my back. The outline was small and grotesque, like a twisted child clinging to me. I froze in horror. My hands flew to my back, but still, I felt nothing. "Do you see it now?" the woman asked. "That's what they see as a baby." I covered my mouth to stifle a scream. The shadow moved as I moved, confirming the woman's words. My heart pounded as reality began to sink in. I was indeed cursed. As I sat in the cold airport holding area, my heart raced. What was this shadow that everyone saw but me? I clutched the rosary Margaret had given me, whispering prayers under my breath, hoping for a miracle. The immigration officer returned with another stern-faced colleague. "We have reviewed your case," he said, "and unless the baby's passport is produced, we cannot allow you entry into the country." "I don't have a baby," I cried. "There is no baby." But as I protested, I could feel the weight of the accusations pressing down on me. The room seemed darker, colder. It was as if an unseen force was feeding off my despair. Margaret's words echoed in my mind. She had told me that the goblin would feed on my despair. The officer's colleague cleared his throat. "If you are unable to comply, we will have to send you back to Zimbabwe on the next available flight." "No, please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "I've done nothing wrong. Please, search my suitcase again," I pleaded. The officer sighed, motioning to another attendant to bring my belongings. My suitcase was emptied again, and this time something new emerged. A tiny, tattered piece of cloth. It looked old and dirty, like it had been hidden there for years. "What is this?" the officer asked, holding it up. "I don't know," I stammered. "It's not mine." The cloth had an eerie feel to it, and as I stared at it, I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. Margaret, standing nearby, gasped. "That's part of the curse," she whispered. "Whoever did this to you placed it in your suitcase. It's a marker." "A marker?" I repeated, confused and terrified. "What does that even mean?" Margaret leaned closer to me, her voice low but urgent. "This cloth," she said, "is connected to whatever is on your back. It's like a tether, keeping the curse alive." I shook my head in disbelief. This can't be happening. I don't believe in such things. But deep down, I remembered my mother's warnings and her insistence that not everyone would be happy for me. Had someone truly cursed me out of jealousy? My mind raced, and one name came to the forefront: Chaz. "I need to get rid of it," I said, gripping the cloth. "No," Margaret snapped, grabbing my hand. "You can't just throw it away. It will only grow stronger." "What do I do then?" I whispered, feeling helpless. The cloth seemed to pulse in my hand, as if it were alive. Margaret hesitated. "You will need someone who understands this kind of evil, someone who can break the curse." Her words filled me with dread. I didn't know anyone like that, not here in England. My only hope lay thousands of miles away, back in Zimbabwe. But how could I go back after coming so far? Left with no other choice, I asked the officers for a phone call. They reluctantly allowed me access to my mobile, and I dialed my mother's number with trembling fingers. When she answered, Her voice was filled with worry. Ndaizivei, my child, is everything okay? Are you in England? I broke down, sobbing as I explained everything. The strange occurrences, the shadow, the baby that everyone else could see but me. My mother listened in silence. Then she said firmly, "This is witchcraft, my child. Someone has cursed you." "Who would do this to me?" I cried. "Why?" My mother didn't hesitate. "You told too many people, didn't you? Someone close to you has done this to you. You need help, but it won't be easy." Meanwhile, back in Zimbabwe, Charles sat in the dim hut of the witch doctor, eagerly awaiting news. "Has she returned?" she asked, her voice dripping with anticipation. The witch doctor frowned. "Not yet, but the goblin is working. It's only a matter of time before she comes back." Charles smirked. "Good. Let her know that she can't be better than me." But the witch doctor's expression darkened. "You should be very careful. Such curses are very dangerous. If they fail, they can backfire. Are you ready for that?" Her smirk faltered. "It won't fail, because I know you're the best at what you do," she said stubbornly. But deep down, an unease crept into her heart. Mrs. Ashworth finally arrived at the airport, her face a mix of confusion and anger. "What is going on here?" she demanded, addressing the immigration officer. "This woman cannot enter without a passport for her baby," the officer replied curtly. Mrs. Ashworth stared at him, bewildered. "What baby? She doesn't have a child." "Everyone here can see it," the officer replied. "It's on her back." Mrs. Ashworth turned to me, her eyes wide. "Ndaizivei, what are they talking about?" I shook my head, sobbing. "I don't know. I don't feel anything, but they keep insisting I'm carrying a baby." Her gaze lingered on me for a moment before she whispered, "Something is not right. We need to fix this." I then realized that she could not see the baby that everyone was talking about. As Mrs. Ashworth argued with the officers, I felt a sudden heaviness on my back. My knees buckled, and a sharp, eerie laugh echoed in my ears. The goblin's presence was growing stronger, feeding on my despair. Margaret, who had stayed by my side all this time, grabbed my arm. "You need to stay strong," she urged me. "It wants you to give up." The shadow on the wall twisted, growing larger and more menacing. Margaret gasped. "It's revealing itself." The officers froze, their faces pale as they stared at the shadow. What is that?" one of them whispered. Mrs. Ashworth stepped in front of me protectively. "I don't know what's happening, but this isn't normal. We need help, and quick." I clutched the rosary tighter, tears streaming down my face as I began to pray aloud. "God, please help me. Whatever this is, please take it away." The shadow flickered, as if weakened by my prayers. But the goblin wasn't done yet. It let out a piercing wail that seemed to shake the entire room. My fate hung in the balance, and I had no idea if I would ever escape this nightmare before me.